So indeed, my name is JP, Jean-Paul or JP, and I work in the telecom ecosystem partnerships team at Meta, it used to be called Facebook. And I'm part of a wider team whose job, if you like, is to work with the telecom ecosystem, essentially service providers, on mutually beneficial programs. Mark Sommer, who's here, if you want to raise your hand, he's running this whole department, if you wish, within Meta in EMEA. I think many of you know him already. And he's there to answer all the difficult questions. You can catch him while he's there. Now, this is what, if you wish, the wider team does. What my team focuses on is on what we call the connectivity part. At least this is part of the remit of my team. Now, one thing before we delve into the metaverse, one thing I would love to highlight is that Meta is a massive contributor to connectivity in different ways. You might have heard of our submarine cables, where we work with various service providers and other ecosystem stakeholders to co-invest and actually share or co-own, if you'd like, some of those fiber pairs. And we have many of those that have been announced and are public, including the one around Africa. This is the work we've done on telecom infra projects, right? Which is essentially an industry body, which we originally catalyzed, and now we're one member of probably 100 active members, working on disaggregation of hardware and software to lower the cost of equipment. Open RAN is one of the most, I would say, known successes coming out of the telecom infra projects, but there are at least maybe 1 or 2 dozen working groups that are working on various challenges. This is the work we do with service providers as well, using some of analytics to help them better understand and even plan the networks, their own networks, because we have a unique visibility of what's happening in the usage of the internet, since our platform is quite used. So we do quite a lot of things. However, as you probably know, the company changed its name this year. So we were Facebook, we're now Meta, and there's a reason for that, because we have enhanced our scope. We're looking further away into what we would consider the next version of the internet, which is the metaverse. And this is why my team is now focusing as well on understanding the readiness of networks for the metaverse and figuring out what we can do to make them even readier if necessary. So before we get into what is the metaverse, I suggest maybe we take a little bit of a path down memory lane. I think this is very similar to the slide that Dr. Lemke presented. You all remember when we were sending SMSs, the first SMSs, a use case probably that the success of which was not predicted. Actually, even remember AMPS before, because I was living in North America, but this is maybe a little bit off topic. And the success of SMSs was unprecedented and not foreseen. And this is, we could argue, a little bit the same thing that happened 10 years later, when photos started to be used on 3G. And then another decade later, when we started having videos being shared. And maybe the trend that we're seeing here is that people want to share, and they want to share richer and richer content, and they want to share more and more frequently. We're all somehow, or we know people who are addicts to that kind of sharing. You could be an addict as well, during the times of text, right? We all talk about these immersive experiences, etc. I remember spending a whole summer playing multi-users Dungeons and Dragons on a text-based Unix machine. So you don't need necessarily a fully immersive technology to be fully immersed. However, it helps, and we'll get to that. So the metaverse is what we see as the next step, a natural step. And the point here that I want to make is that we see it as an evolution, not necessarily a total revolution. And we're just trying to forecast what is going to happen and be there at the beginning of the story. You see? So what is the metaverse? The metaverse, there are as many definitions, I think, as the number of people who are trying to answer the question. Nevertheless, let me venture some definition of that. It's a set of spaces, virtual spaces, where people can connect and feel a sense of presence. I think that is the strong difference there, is really feel a sense of presence. I know we've all started here, I mean, many of my predecessors on this stage mentioned how nice it was to actually see people, feel people in 3D. Somebody actually yesterday told me, oh, I'm seeing you in 3D for the first time, because I saw you on 2D on a VC. I don't know what it meant, which one is best. But anyways, feeling that this feeling of presence is something that we consider is going to bridge a new gap in sharing. Now, of course, lots of applications come. Some have already been molded, I would say, by other speakers, obviously in terms of training, in terms of the construction example that was given, I think was quite revealing. So there are lots of potential industrial applications. Gaming is a natural one as well. Yet I would still venture that, actually, I think the video was playing here. No, there should have been. Anyhow, I would venture that the full understanding of what the metaverse is going to be, what is going to be the killer app, if you'd like, of the metaverse, is still to be determined. What is important, at least from a meta point of view, is that we're seeing the metaverse, if you wish, realization as a journey that is going to take time. We see it over a decade. Yet we're building for it now. Which gets me to my next point. What is Meta doing for the metaverse? Something I will come back to, I think, later on, but I want to emphasize from the onset, is that even though we did change our name to Meta, and even though I think the fact, well, since we've done it, a lot of people are talking about the metaverse. I think Dr. Malik was saying this in his video presentation as well, etc. We don't own the metaverse, nor do we have any pretense of doing that. The way we see it is we're going to be one of the players there in the same way that we are one of the players of the internet. We just believe that we can make it happen potentially a little bit faster than it would organically, and we have appetite to be pioneers so that we can find our right place into that metaverse. And we're doing things already. The way sometimes I like to say, I don't know, this is not approved by our corporate speech, but I like to say it's a bit like an impressionist painting, right? You do little touches and then it all starts working together. And these are the few touches, I would say, meaningful touches that or initiatives that we're working on to bring the metaverse faster, closer to us. One of them is our platform called Horizon World, which is the platform today if you have an Oculus headset, but you can also have it on your phone, and eventually, hopefully, it will be compatible with other devices, etc. It's where you can go and experience a virtual reality environment. You can build worlds there, you can attend, so it was merged with something else that we called Horizon Venue, so you can attend events there, you can create your own events. So this is, if you wish, kind of our platform, our Decentraland, if you like, made by Meta. The second area where we're focusing a lot is on avatars. Now, avatars today, if you've used some of our avatars, they can look a little bit cartoonish. Yet we still have about, I think, a billion, 10 to the 18. Most of us are engineers here, so 10 to the 18 possibilities of avatars. But there's still, you know, you go to a meeting room, there's something else we do that you can have today in our virtual reality environments. You have a virtual reality meeting, and you sometimes have twins. Like, hey, why did people? You have a billion possibilities, but people are still choosing to look alike. I mean, some of those are not flattering as well, so maybe they get discarded. But avatars is much more than simply a representation. The way we see it is it's going to be part of our identity in the same way that an email is today. And that means a lot of things in terms of interoperability, in terms of common standards, so that you could carry your avatar away. There are lots of other topics that maybe I'll have a chance to get into, such as any purchases that you would do for your avatar, in case to customize your avatar with NFTs, etc., would be transferable from one environment to the other. Hence, increasing the utility of both the avatar and any kind of purchases that you or somebody may have done for that avatar. Now, we also have initiatives, and you probably have heard of those, on devices. Now, Oculus, so now called the Quest 2, is reportedly the most successful commercially, at least device, VR device, one that is selling the most in the world. And we have several iterations of that. I'll say a few things about it. It's available, I think, in many countries, but not all. And then you have Ray-Ban Stories. Ray-Ban Stories are those essentially Ray-Bans that are that contain a camera. I don't think you're going to be able to catch Mark enough, but I know he has one. Since I brought it from France, it's not sold yet in Germany. It may sound like, okay, so you have a camera on your glasses, so what? But actually, first of all, trying it I was converted when I tried it the first time, because the quality of the pictures and the videos you take is very good. The quality of the sound is excellent. So you could use it to make calls and connect it to your phone or to listen to a podcast. But the real reason we're doing this is actually to experiment with technology, to achieve packing so much compute, for lack of a better word, but it's actually electronics, it's cameras, etc., without in a frame that is as light as a typical Ray-Ban. The vision, and I may be overstepping my next slide, but that's okay, is essentially to cross those two, to get the same experience you're getting on Oculus, or maybe even the next version of Oculus, on something as light and as transportable as a Ray-Ban Stories. Clearly, this requires a little bit of a leap of faith, because a lot of the technology that would be required for this to happen is still not invented. And this is also one of the reasons why we're putting so much of our energy, resources, and frankly speaking, investments, CapEx, to try to crack that technology gap. So a few things about what we're doing. I won't dwell too much. So new VR headsets, this is basically next generations of Quest that are going to come to the market, pushing the boundaries further, both in terms of power consumptions, making them lighter, but as well in terms of, for example, color pass-through and more realistic interaction, so that you can get from a VR experience closer to an AR type of experience. Another one is to use, again, the fact that you have cameras inside and outside your devices to do 3D room reconstruction. And for example, in the case of the construction site that was alluded to earlier, this is something that would come in very handy, but it also allows us to feed into various of our AI, that Meta has significant investments in artificial intelligence. So to feed that into models for number of recognition of patterns, recognition of construction material, etc. So it feeds into those kind of algorithms. Thirdly, which might again sound a little bit fun, but actually we think is extremely important, so that people feel like their identity is represented in the metaverse, is photorealistic avatars. And this is actually much more difficult than one would imagine, because it can be done quite easily with the cameras that are looking into your face. But rendering emotions, rendering facial expressions, while at the same time knowing that if you have a bug and suddenly your face is missing something, it can be quite creepy. So getting it right is difficult, but this is something we're working on, because again we believe that this will help have people feel like they are really in the metaverse. So then when I look at, for example, somebody like Dirk, for example, I see him, I recognize him immediately. I don't have to remember that, oh yeah, his avatar has an earring and blonde hair, for example. We do a lot of other things. I want to fast forward quickly, but one thing that I really like is this wristband, electromyo, I forgot exactly what it means, but essentially what it means is that we capture the electrical messages from your brain to your hands, and therefore be able to allow you to control your environment in the metaverse, to move your hands, to type on a keyboard without actually having to do it, to actually do it. So that means that you can have very different almost impossible movements that can be done. It might also mean that you're going to type much faster. I don't know, I haven't tried it, but it works. So you're actually able to create movements without actually moving your hand. And of course, without having those, if you've used the Oculus or the Quest 2, without having those joysticks, which after a while, I mean, the first time you hold them, they're nice, but after a while, it gets a bit cumbersome, especially if you're using it to do sports, etc., which is obviously another use case that I haven't mentioned. Sorry, I forgot the animations, but you'll forgive me for this one. So let me just go directly onto more of the technical part. So one of the questions, of course, that we asked, and we're actually asking ourselves as well, is, okay, are networks metaverse ready? That was the question of Dirk. And with an engineer would accept the answer I'm going to give you. Depends. Depends on the use case, right? If for now the metaverse is having a video call with AR, like additional, augmented reality effects, the filter, like the cat that was so famous during the pandemic, judge I'm not a cat kind of thing, it works fine. You don't need much more than that. And you could argue that for some people, this is the first step into the metaverse. If you're starting looking at some gaming applications, cow gaming applications, lots of people playing from potentially different areas of the world or the country, playing on a simultaneous game, then clearly our networks are not ready for that. So what we have done, we've done two things. First is made some assumptions on what is needed to get the metaverse-ready networks, and then run some simulations or analysis based on the data that we have access to assess the readiness of networks. Now, the numbers that you see here as a top-line number, 150 milliseconds for video calling, it would surprise no one, it's 5 megabits per second. For the most demanding applications, we've been going with a more or less 25, I think here we say 25, 30, 25 megabits per second with a 30 millisecond latency. Of course, the devil is in the detail. Are these number averages? Is it the median? Is it the P95? And when you run those numbers with these different assumptions, you get drastically different answers. Now, the other, I would say, caveat to that readiness of networks is that are these metrics that I just showed, basically latency and bandwidth, the only ones we should care about? And how do we define them? For example, latency itself, right? Is it from the edge to the end user? Is it from what sometimes we call the photon to motion? There's a definition for that. Clearly, end-to-end latency, this is the way we see it, is what is going to matter. And we don't always have the tools to measure it correctly. And I think this is one of the things we are working on and we want to work on with the industry to get right. I'll get to that slide in a second. The other topic, obviously, is symmetry of bandwidth, right? Again, depending on the usage, in some cases, this did down. If you're watching, one of the use cases is watching the FIFA World Cup live and feeling, with the feeling that you're there, everything in 3D. Most of it is going to be downstream, even if you're talking to somebody who's watching with you from another city, your friend, your brother, or whoever. If you're playing a game, and there's a lot of interaction in that game, then maybe symmetry of bandwidth becomes another topic. So I think this is the other part that we're working on, is to get the full picture of the KPIs that we need to measure for metaverse readiness. Now, unsurprisingly, so let me tell you our approach now of what we're doing, and then a little bit of our early findings. So what we're doing is we're working with a number of partners, looking at the data that we have, and if you wish, cross-referencing that, so basically large telcos, right? Cross-referencing with what they see in terms of metaverse readiness based on the assumptions that I've mentioned earlier on. So this is what we call, if you wish, establish the network readiness. And then the second step is understanding where the bottlenecks are. Because clearly, for example, from our point of view, we see data of people using the Facebook app, for example, right? We don't know necessarily if they're on Wi-Fi, if that Wi-Fi is backhauled by ADSL or FTTH or cable. So this is where working with our partners to unpack makes us understand better where the potential bottleneck is. Clearly, if it's ADSL, we can discard it and assume that they'll be on FTTH in 2 or 3 years from now. Same thing if it's mobile. We can know if it's 3G, 4G, 5G, but we don't necessarily know the network architecture behind it, what is the backhaul behind it, and what could be the reason for potentially lower performance of a given cell site. So once we do that, then we are actually working with our partners to identify what could be done to improve. And this is where we have a number of initiatives in our connectivity labs, not necessarily always from Meta. We work, for example, with some partners to test their APIs. I think that was mentioned, and we'll talk about that, of essentially network slicing type of APIs, and quantify what is the actual impact. If we were to do this, we can have, recreate an environment of, say, gamers or cloud VR, etc. And then what is actually the impact of deploying that kind of improvement on the network? And what would it be if we extrapolate to the level of the country? So this is the rationale, if you wish, behind our network readiness initiative. Now, the way we're approaching this with the industry, again, in the team that I'm part of, because obviously Meta does a lot of things, is on 3 ways. The first one is one I just explained. So, working on use cases to do various use cases, to do network trials, we call them network trials, to try to understand what would be the improvement on the metaverse, right? The second one is actually about the same. I should have put only one. Let me focus on the third one. The third one is working with telecom service providers on their innovation initiatives. This is something we've started this public, in Spain with Telefónica, right? What we want to do there, and this is slightly maybe outside the pure connectivity focus, is realize that, and I think somebody was talking earlier, I think it was, again, Dr. Lemke, was it? Sorry, somebody of my predecessor was talking about the importance of use cases, right? We can build it, but if you build the network for the wrong use case, nobody's going to use it. That was the 3G example with the fridge. So this is exactly what we're trying to want to avoid at Meta, and make sure that we uncover the right use cases. And we're very cognizant that no single company, regardless of how innovative we or some of other metaverse wannabe players think they are, we're not going to necessarily know what is going to be the killer app. And this is something we're doing now, is working with that ecosystem. So we're going to be reaching out to many of the ecosystem players in Europe in particular to understand what are the various initiatives they have, and most, I think that was mentioned by the person from Dresden, right? The Telefonica or Vodafone, sorry, who had an innovation lab announced recently in Dresden. So we want to work with this kind of ecosystem to contribute to that. And how do we contribute to that? Well, you've seen all those impressionist paintings that I've shown you before. So we have software, we have hardware, we have a number of things that we can provide to that ecosystem so that they can test what the metaverse would look like, what their own use cases, and hopefully come up with the innovative use cases that are going to bring the industry forward in terms of user acceptance and user adoption. I just noticed that I can see my slides here. It's a little bit late. The role of 5G. So here's an interesting one, or 5G or mobile, you could say. Because what we see at Meta is that in the short term, and short is probably in the next 2 to 3 years, which is a bit strange for Meta. Usually for us, short is 3 weeks. But we've kind of changed a little bit and looking at things a little bit with a much longer time frame. The adoption that we see, at least in what we define as the metaverse, obviously we're a little bit more biased toward the consumer use cases as opposed to the industry use cases because of the nature of our company. So we see that the first use cases are going to be mostly indoors. So therefore, a lot of our focus from a connectivity point of view in the short term is mostly on essentially Wi-Fi backhaul by fiber, and working on optimization there. But I don't want to steal the thunder of my colleague who's going to talk tomorrow, so I'll put this a little bit aside. Now, At the same time, we see 5G and Wi-Fi as complementary. Of course, when it comes to spectrum, there could be other debates, but when it comes to actually the end user experience, people don't care if they're on 5G or they're on Wi-Fi as long as it works, right? As long as the bandwidth is there, as long as it doesn't make necessarily a huge difference on what they're paying for. So we see the importance of 5G to kind of level up in terms of experience to what we're going to be getting with Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7, backhauled by FTTH. And here's where we see both opportunities and challenges. I don't have all the answers, but I think some of the answers are obvious and have been already alluded to by some of the colleagues before. It's about, at the end, it's about physics, I would say, engineering. You need to make the frequent case fast. You need to make the slow case as infrequent as possible and limit the damage that that slow case would happen. This is, basically caching type of thinking, right? You need to bring in order to do that, obviously, you need to bring the compute. I don't like that word because it's a bit all-encompassing, but I'll use it nevertheless, as close as possible to the user to reduce latency, right? So this is where we see as the unlocks that 5G are going to bring to enable a metaverse-like connectivity for AR use cases. Obviously, when you step out of the home, fortunately, maybe in 5 years from now, with Ray-Ban stories that give you the same experience as an Oculus today, where we recognize people. I mean, you can imagine all the use cases. I won't get into that. And so it's a number of innovations that are all about getting latency as small as possible and getting computational power as close as possible to the end user, which in the case of Meta doesn't necessarily have to stop at the telecom operators, let's say network, right? So at the eNode V or at the various POP. It could even happen in the home, for example. Again, now I'm not talking about 5G, but it can also happen in the home. We can definitely envisage or consider that some processing would happen, for example, on a companion device of whatever you're wearing, on your own Wi-Fi router or anything like that. So these are the type of thoughts that we're working on to understand how this is going to help in reducing the P, whatever is going to be, P80, P90 latency. Sorry. Hold on. We get to the right slide. And obviously, this is not going to happen simply because Meta decides that they want to do. We're working with industry bodies, 3GPP. I think it was mentioned as one of the most successful standardization bodies. So we're working there. We believe that the ones that are coming, release 18, release 19, will provide the right APIs and the right standards to allow us to experiment, to put in practice enable the right features to provide the metaverse-like experiences. Maybe I would like to leave you with one thought. I think it's here. Even though Meta is a fierce proponent now of the metaverse, I've said it before, I'd like to reiterate the message that we don't want to build it alone. The telecom industry is almost a twin partner of Meta. Again, I think I'm paraphrasing somebody before who said that without the right connectivity, even the best use case is useless. I'm probably paraphrasing wrong. And it's about the same for us as well, right? Without connectivity, how can you use our platforms, the current ones or the future ones even more? The opposite could be also true. We think that the fact that we are, many of end users, many consumers value the connectivity because they're getting experiences on the platforms that we provide. So we're in bed together, if you'd like. Mark, my boss, likes to say we have a joint product. Maybe it's a little bit extreme, but I think it goes along that way. So we're not going to build the metaverse alone, for sure, but we're not going to build it without the telecom industry working with us and other players as well. So the message I would say is let's do that together. I'm very happy to take discrete questions. I'm going to be here all day, including on the cruise. I might give discrete answers or just smile, I don't know. But thank you all for your attention.